In the spring of 2022, Laura Jennings's life was steady, predictable, and built around the job she loved. She was 37 years old, a middle school English teacher in Phoenix, Arizona. Her apartment, a modest unit near downtown, reflected her personality, organized, warm, and quietly cheerful. The walls carried framed quotes about teaching, and her refrigerator was covered with colorful thank you cards from students. Each morning started the same way. The alarm sounded at 5:30 a.m., and she gave herself one press of the snooze button before getting out of bed. Coffee came first, then a shower, makeup, and clothes chosen for both professionalism and comfort, something she could teach in all day without feeling restricted. By 7:15 a.m., she was at Saguaro Middle School, a full 45 minutes before the first bell. Laura liked that time to prepare her lessons without interruption. Her classroom was colorful and stocked with books. Over the years, she'd built a reputation for making literature fun. Shakespeare's plays became interactive performances, and grammar lessons were turned into creative challenges. Students who started the year claiming they hated reading often left with a new favorite book. Her principal, Mr. Torres, frequently referred to her as the heart of the English department. At lunch, she joined her closest colleagues, Emma and Diane, in the teacher's lounge. They swapped stories, shared frustrations about standardized testing, and laughed over small classroom mishaps. Privately, Laura felt a quiet emptiness that work could not fill. 3 years earlier, her marriage to Mark had ended. She'd focused on her students and friends, but the house felt especially empty when the school day ended. Evenings were predictable, grading papers, lesson planning, and watching Netflix until she drifted off to sleep. Weekends were for errands and the occasional coffee meetup with friends. Her younger sister, Melissa, occasionally nudged her to think about dating again. Laura usually brushed off the suggestion. She hadn't been on a first date in 15 years, and the idea of meeting strangers online made her uneasy. Still, she couldn't ignore that her social life felt frozen in place. One evening in April, Melissa sent a short text that lingered in Laura's mind. "Did you download that dating app yet? Stop making excuses." Laura sighed at the message, but later that night, with a stack of ungraded essays beside her, she finally gave in. She downloaded the app, created a profile, and then put the phone down. For 3 days, she barely touched it. When she did, the profiles she saw felt unrelatable. Men looking for short-term flings, extreme outdoor adventures, or lifestyles far removed from her own. She almost deleted the app entirely. Then she saw his profile: Ethan Miller, 39, marine contractor currently overseas. His photos showed a friendly, confident man with kind brown eyes. Some were in military uniform, others with a golden retriever, and a few in outdoor settings. His bio mentioned volunteer work with veterans, restoration projects, and a fondness for classic literature. Laura hesitated, then swiped right. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. It's a match. Ethan's first message stood out immediately. Instead of a casual greeting or a comment about her appearance, he wrote, "I noticed you teach English. What's your favorite book to introduce to students who think they hate reading?" Laura smiled at the question. It was specific, thoughtful, and related to something she cared about. She replied about using The Outsiders to engage reluctant readers, explaining how the story's themes resonated with middle school students. Ethan responded with his own story about reading Hemingway during quiet moments on base. The conversation flowed easily from there. He asked follow-up questions about her work, and she found herself talking about challenges with short attention spans, the pride of seeing students improve, and her dream of writing children's books someday. Unlike other online exchanges she'd read about, there were no inappropriate comments or attempts to change the subject to something superficial. Within days, they moved from in-app messages to texting. Ethan explained that he was currently finishing a security contract in the Middle East. His schedule, he said, was unpredictable, but he always made time to check in with her. One night, after she told him about a particularly exhausting day, he replied, "Teaching middle school takes special courage. I've been in combat situations that probably weren't as challenging as 30 hormonal 13-year-olds. It made her laugh out loud in her empty apartment. The first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Their first phone call lasted 3 hours. Ethan's voice carried a slight Southern accent, and his stories painted a picture of someone who had lived widely and faced challenges. He talked about growing up in Georgia, joining the Marines at 22, and later moving into private security work. He spoke of missing home, American food, and stability. "The hardest part isn't the danger," he said quietly. "It's not having someone to come home to." Laura didn't expect how much that line would stay with her. By the second week, Ethan suggested a video call. Laura spent time choosing an outfit, a blue blouse that her friend Emma often said brought out her eyes. When his face appeared on screen, the video quality wasn't perfect, but he looked exactly like his photos. His smile felt genuine, and the way he looked at her through the camera made her feel seen. The occasional freezes in the video feed or moments of audio distortion, he explained, were due to poor internet at his base. "Sorry about the connection," he'd say with a grin. "It's worth every dropped call just to see your smile." Their calls became routine. She would wake up to a good morning text, spend the day exchanging short messages between classes, and end the night with a video chat. Ethan remembered everything she told him, details about her students, her conflicts with school administration, even the names of books she'd been meaning to read. As spring moved into summer, the conversations deepened. She told him about her fears of never having children, the insecurities left over from her divorce, and her dream of traveling through Europe. He responded with empathy and encouragement. During one call, he said, "I know this might seem fast, but when you've lived the life I've lived, you recognize what matters. Meeting you feels like finding something I didn't even know I was searching for." It was exactly the kind of statement that made Laura feel this connection was rare, maybe once in a lifetime. By July, her schedule revolved around Ethan's availability. She woke at 4 a.m. for calls because of the time difference and rearranged her days to ensure they could talk. During her summer break, they spoke multiple times a day. Then one night, he said something that took her by surprise. "When I get home in September, I don't want to waste another minute. What do you think about getting married this fall?" Laura surprised herself by saying yes almost immediately. Once Laura said yes, their conversations shifted into planning mode almost overnight. They talked about wedding venues, guest lists, and honeymoon destinations. Ethan suggested something small and intimate, with only close family and friends. He sent her screenshots of picturesque venues he'd found online, while she created a shared document of options and prices. They even began looking at houses together. Ethan claimed he had saved a significant amount of money during his deployment and could contribute heavily to a down payment. He had strong opinions: Southern exposure for the master bedroom, space for his dog once he returned, a yard that would get plenty of sunlight. Laura started making small changes in her apartment based on his preferences. She bought new bedding he admired during a virtual tour and rearranged her living room furniture following his suggestions. Each change made her feel like she was preparing for the life they would soon share. Her friends Emma and Diane met Ethan via group video chat. They were impressed by his charm and the way he seemed genuinely interested in Laura's world. Her parents had a virtual dinner with him, and while they were a little reserved, they admitted he came across as polite and attentive. Only her sister, Melissa, voiced hesitation. Over coffee one weekend, Melissa asked, "Don't you think this is moving extremely fast? You've never even met him in person." Laura repeated something Ethan had told her many times. "When you know, you know. Besides, we video chat constantly. It's not like he's hiding anything." Melissa dropped the subject, but Laura noticed her sister's guarded expression. Ethan's gestures reinforced the sense that their relationship was real. On her birthday, a bouquet of her favorite flowers arrived with a note referencing a childhood story she had only mentioned once. He remembered small details most people would forget, and each act of thoughtfulness drew her closer. By late summer, Laura's social life outside of Ethan had nearly disappeared. She began declining invitations from friends if they conflicted with their calls. Her free time was dedicated to their conversations, their wedding plans, and their imagined future. They often fell asleep on video calls, her phone propped on the pillow beside her. His background rarely changed, but she attributed that to his being stationed on base. The occasional ambient noises that didn't quite fit, voices, television sounds, traffic, were explained away as background activity from shared quarters or nearby areas. One night in August, Ethan told her, "I count the days until I can hold you. I've never connected with anyone like this." By this point, Laura had introduced him as her fiancé to her principal and some of her colleagues. She even began asking about adding him to her health insurance and adjusting her budget for shared expenses after the wedding. It never crossed her mind that the man she spoke to every day, the man she planned to marry, did not exist. Then came the conversation that would set the real scam in motion. Late one evening, Ethan said, "My deployment is ending in 3 weeks, but there's something important I need your help with." Laura asked what was wrong, bracing herself for news of an injury or delay. Ethan explained that he had accumulated valuable items during his time overseas: military medals, family heirlooms, important documents, and about $75,000 in cash savings. He claimed banking overseas was risky for contractors and that transferring the funds could cause problems with his security clearance. He wanted to send the items to her in a secure trunk before his return. He assured her the shipping company specialized in high-value transports for military personnel and showed her what appeared to be official shipping documents and inventory lists. "I wouldn't ask if there were any other option," he said. "There's no one else I trust with this." Laura agreed without hesitation. 2 days after their conversation about the trunk, Laura received an email confirmation from a company called International Secure Transport. It had a tracking number, delivery estimate, and documents with official-looking seals and letterheads. Everything looked professional and organized, exactly what she would expect from a legitimate military shipping service. She cleared space in her bedroom closet, bought a new security camera for her apartment, and began counting down the days until both Ethan and the trunk arrived. A week later, on a Tuesday morning before school, her phone rang from an unfamiliar number. She answered, and a man introduced himself as Agent Robert Wilson with U.S. Customs and Border Protection at Los Angeles International Airport. His tone was authoritative. "We're holding a secured trunk addressed to you from overseas. The shipment contains undeclared currency and lacks proper clearance documentation. This is a serious customs violation that requires immediate resolution." Laura's heart sped up. This was Ethan's shipment. She explained what she knew, but the agent said it would require a $2,500 processing fee to release it. Otherwise, the trunk would be confiscated, and both she and the sender could be subject to investigation. The agent's words carried enough urgency to make her nervous. After hanging up, she immediately called Ethan, even though it was supposedly 3 a.m. in his time zone. He answered quickly, sounding tired but concerned. "I'm so sorry this is happening," he said. "These bureaucratic complications are unfortunately common. I'll reimburse you the moment I arrive, but if they investigate, my return could be delayed by months and could damage my career." Laura didn't have much in savings, but she believed in the seriousness of the situation. That evening, she transferred the $2,500 to the account provided by the agent. She received a receipt with government seals, a case number, and a tracking update showing the trunk's status changed to clearance pending. 3 days later, another call came, this time from a different official. They said the shipment required an additional $3,500 in insurance because of the high value of the contents. Laura hesitated, mentioning that none of these fees had been discussed before. The man directed her to a government website explaining regulations for high-value shipments, complete with matching language from the phone call. When she called Ethan to vent her frustration, his voice carried anger. "These people make my blood boil. But right now, they hold all the cards. I've been through this before during deployments. It's a nightmare." His reaction convinced her it was just another obstacle to overcome together. She pulled from her emergency savings to make the payment. Then came another request, $4,200 for diplomatic handling to transfer the shipment from military jurisdiction to civilian. This was followed by $5,800 for a legal clearance bond, $7,500 for secure transport insurance, $8,700 for treasury verification of large currency imports, and finally, $6,500 for the final customs release. Each request came with professionally prepared documentation, updated tracking, and perfectly timed reassurance from Ethan. By late August, Laura had depleted her savings, maxed out 2 credit cards, and even borrowed from her 401k. The total had reached $38,200, nearly her entire annual salary. When the last fee was supposedly paid, she believed the ordeal was over. The trunk would arrive, Ethan would be home soon, and their life together could finally begin. Then, just days before the planned delivery, she received another email from Agent Thomas Wilson requesting an additional $3,400 for an international verification fee. But the email began, "Dear Sandra." Laura froze. Sandra wasn't her name. The moment Laura saw the wrong name, her stomach tightened. She reread the email several times, hoping she had misread it. But it was clear. This was a copied template where someone forgot to change the recipient's name. For the first time, a thought pushed its way into her mind. What if none of this is real? She tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was just an administrative mistake. Maybe the agent handled multiple shipments and got names mixed up. But the unease stayed with her. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and began searching online for U.S. Customs trunk fees. The official government website made one point very clear. Customs fees are never collected directly from recipients through wire transfers or payment apps. Her hands shook as she clicked through more pages. She found warnings about scams involving fake customs agents and overseas shipments. The patterns sounded disturbingly familiar. Laura tried calling Ethan to talk about what she'd found. This time, he didn't answer. She called again and again. No reply. She sent texts asking him to call her, but the silence continued. By late evening, her anxiety had built to the point where she knew she couldn't handle it alone. She picked up the phone and called her sister, Melissa. Her voice cracked as soon as Melissa answered. "I need help. Something's wrong." 30 minutes later, Melissa was at her apartment. Laura explained everything. Her relationship with Ethan, the trunk, the fees, the mounting payments, and finally, the Dear Sandra email. Melissa didn't criticize or scold her. Instead, she opened her laptop and began checking each detail. Her first call was to the actual U.S. Customs and Border Protection Office, where an officer confirmed they had no record of the shipment and never request payment in the manner Laura described. Next, Melissa contacted a friend who worked in banking fraud detection. They reviewed the accounts Laura had sent money to and found they were linked to temporary holding accounts commonly used by scammers. Then Melissa ran a reverse image search on Ethan's photos. Within minutes, results appeared. Identical images used on multiple social media profiles under different names. Some were listed as a firefighter in Colorado, others as an architect in Canada. Melissa turned the screen toward her sister. "Laura, I think you need to prepare yourself. This man isn't real." Over the next hour, they uncovered more evidence. The phone numbers traced back to internet-based calling services. The shipping websites were registered only months earlier and used hidden domain ownership. The documents contained slight formatting errors, like inconsistent fonts and misspelled department names, that Laura had never noticed before. The final blow came when they found a Reddit thread posted by a woman in Oregon describing an identical scam. A military contractor overseas, a trunk full of valuables, fake customs fees, and constant video chats. Even the story details, like the medals, heirlooms, and $75,000 in cash, were the same. Laura sat in silence, her mind spinning. So, everything? All of it? The wedding? The dog? The plans? Melissa nodded slowly. Yes, it's all part of the script. Laura's chest felt tight. She wasn't just processing the loss of money, she was mourning a relationship that never existed. All those long calls, private confessions, moments she thought were genuine, every single one had been calculated. Her voice broke. Who am I even grieving for? A ghost? The next morning, Laura walked into the Phoenix Police Department with a folder so full it barely closed. Inside were screenshots of every message, records of every payment, copies of every email, and the shipping documents she once thought were real. Detective Martinez met her in a small interview room. His voice was calm, his questions precise. For more than 3 hours, Laura went through everything step by step. How she met Ethan, the timeline of their communication, the wedding plans, the arrival of the trunk story, and each payment she had made. Martinez listened without judgment. When she paused, he said, "You're not alone in this. These are sophisticated criminal enterprises. They're designed to manipulate good people into doing exactly what you did." Her meticulous record-keeping impressed him. Many victims, he explained, came in with only vague details. Laura's organized evidence would give investigators a real advantage. The case was referred to the Arizona Attorney General's office, which brought in a financial crimes specialist. The FBI also became involved after reviewing the materials and recognizing patterns that matched other active cases. Digital forensic experts began tracing the origins of the emails, phone calls, and payment accounts. They followed IP addresses through multiple layers of obfuscation until 2 main locations emerged: an extended stay hotel in Las Vegas and an apartment complex outside Chicago. Surveillance teams were deployed. Over several weeks, investigators built a picture of the operation, 2 men running multiple online identities, each with detailed backstories, scripted conversations, and coordinated schedules to maintain contact with several victims at once. The suspects were identified as James Lell, 42, and Tyler Crawford, 35, both American citizens with prior convictions for fraud. Their backgrounds showed a history of online scams, but the operation they were running now was far more sophisticated than anything in their past cases. When law enforcement executed search warrants, they seized laptops containing scripts for various fake personas, files detailing each victim's personal information, and calendars used to manage interactions. They also found voice-changing software, deepfake technology for video calls, and dozens of prepaid burner phones. Perhaps most disturbing were the victim files, meticulously organized folders containing transcripts of conversations, notes on emotional triggers, and strategies for extracting more money. In October, Lell and Crawford were arrested and charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Investigators found that they had 17 active victims across the country, including Laura. The amount stolen ranged from a few $1,000s to over $100,000 in some cases. When Martinez called Laura to tell her about the arrests, she felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. The men she had pictured as shadowy figures in far-off places were actually living ordinary lives in U.S. cities. "Your documentation helped us connect the dots and move quickly," Martinez told her. "You probably saved other people from losing what you did." The relief was tempered by reality. Recovering the stolen money would be difficult. Out of the $38,200 Laura had lost, only $11,300 was recovered from accounts frozen during the investigation. The rest had already been withdrawn or transferred beyond reach. Still, she had answers. The silence from Ethan made sense now. The voice on the other end of the calls hadn't belonged to a devoted fiancé overseas. It had been one of these men, reading from a script, adjusting his tone to match her emotions. Knowing the truth didn't erase the damage, but it ended the waiting, the false hope, and the endless wondering. The arrests gave Laura some closure, but they didn't fix the damage left behind. Her finances were in shambles. Nearly $27,000 of her losses were unrecovered. She had maxed out 2 credit cards, withdrawn from her 401k, and taken out a personal loan to cover the final payment demand. The debt sat heavily on her shoulders, compounded by the interest that would accumulate over time. Her credit score had dropped, making even simple applications, like for a new phone plan, more difficult. She had to contact her bank, explain the situation, and work out payment arrangements. The school district approved a small emergency loan, and Melissa helped her create a strict 3-year repayment plan. But the numbers were only part of the toll. The emotional impact was harder to quantify. Laura had trouble sleeping, often lying awake replaying conversations with Ethan, dissecting every word for clues she had missed. She alternated between shame and anger, shame for believing, and anger at the people who had built such an elaborate lie. She avoided social gatherings, afraid of questions about her engagement. When she did go out, she felt self-conscious, imagining people wondering how she could have been so gullible. At work, she kept her usual smile, but her colleagues noticed she was quieter. Even her students picked up on her distraction. A few times, she had to step out of class to gather herself when waves of grief hit unexpectedly. The loneliness after her divorce had been a quiet ache. This was different. It was the hollow collapse after realizing that the person who had filled that void never existed at all. It was Melissa who gently pushed her toward getting help. She handed Laura a pamphlet for an organization called RAFSA, Recovery and Awareness for Scam-Affected Individuals. Laura hesitated at first. The idea of walking into a room and admitting she'd been scammed was daunting, but she went. The first meeting was in a small community center conference room. She sat quietly, listening to others share their experiences. A retired doctor, a business owner, a college professor. Every story had a different set of details, but the pattern was familiar. A slow build of trust, a fabricated emergency, and financial exploitation. One woman, Margaret, who had lost $120,000, said something that stuck with Laura. "The hardest part isn't the money. It's grieving someone who never existed." For the first time since the truth came out, Laura felt understood. She began attending regularly. Over time, she started sharing her own story. Speaking it aloud helped reduce the weight of shame she had been carrying. Others in the group validated what Detective Martinez had told her, that scams like this are designed to bypass logic and target human emotion. The group didn't just offer emotional support. They shared practical strategies for rebuilding finances, securing personal information, and recognizing warning signs in the future. By January, Laura noticed small signs of progress. She was sleeping better. She could talk about the scam without her voice breaking. And she began to feel a sense of purpose in using her experience to help others. The emotional wound was still there, but it was healing, not in a straight line, but in unpredictable steps forward and back. By early spring, Laura had begun to see her experience through a different lens. She was still a victim of a crime, but she was also someone who could help prevent others from going through the same thing. Her first opportunity came when a local bank partnered with RAFSA to host a community fraud awareness workshop. They asked if she'd be willing to speak. At first, she hesitated. Telling strangers about her mistakes was one thing. Doing it in front of her own community felt harder. But she agreed. Standing at the podium in the bank's community room, Laura looked out at an audience of about 30 people. Some were retirees, some middle-aged professionals, a few college students. She began simply, "I'm here today because I thought I was talking to the love of my life. Instead, I was talking to a criminal who stole nearly my entire year's salary." She told her story plainly, without dramatics, but with the honesty she wished someone had given her before she downloaded that dating app. She explained the psychological tactics the scammers used, the way they mirrored her interests, remembered every detail, and built an emotional connection strong enough to override her doubts. "These criminals study human behavior," she said. "They know your needs, your fears, and your hopes before you even realize you've shared them. Then they build the perfect person to meet them." Afterward, several attendees came up to thank her. One elderly man admitted he had almost sent money to someone claiming to be a military widow. Another woman said she had been talking to someone online for months and now planned to ask more questions. The feedback reinforced something Laura had already started to believe. Her experience could be a warning light for others. She began speaking at more events: senior centers, library workshops, and eventually at her own school district's Teacher in Service Day. She also worked with the district to develop an internet safety unit for middle school students, covering not just stranger danger but also digital manipulation and financial scams. Her message to students was direct. If someone online is asking you for secrecy or money, no matter how good the reason sounds, you need to stop and talk to a trusted adult. Scammers count on you not asking questions. Meanwhile, the legal case against Lell and Crawford moved forward. Laura was asked to testify at the preliminary hearing. The day she walked into the courtroom, she felt a wave of anxiety. She spotted them at the defense table. Two men in plain suits, not the shadowy masterminds she had imagined, but ordinary-looking people. Seeing them didn't bring the satisfaction she'd expected. It was sobering. These weren't brilliant con artists from far away. They were just men who had chosen to hurt others for money, using scripts and stolen images to destroy trust. Both eventually accepted plea deals. Lell received 10 years in federal prison. Crawford received 8. The prosecution read statements from several victims, including Laura's. She focused hers on the emotional damage rather than just the financial loss. "You didn't just take my savings," she said. "You took time I can't get back, trust I can't fully rebuild, and memories that were never real. But you won't get the last word on my life." When she stepped down from the witness stand, she felt lighter, not healed completely, but more in control.
By the time the school year ended, Laura's life looked different from the one she had before the scam. The debt was still there, but so was a repayment plan she could manage. Her credit score was slowly improving. She had moved from surviving to rebuilding. More importantly, her sense of purpose had shifted. She was no longer just recovering, she was actively using her story to protect others. She became a regular speaker for RAFSA events and continued leading workshops at community centers, banks, and schools. Her internet safety curriculum was officially adopted by her district, and she worked with other educators to refine it. The lessons didn't just focus on obvious threats but on recognizing patterns of manipulation. She included examples from her own experience how subtle emotional hooks can be used to bypass logical thinking. She still had hard days. Some mornings, she'd wake up thinking about the early months with Ethan and feel a pang of loss before reminding herself it had all been scripted. Trust didn't come easily anymore, and she was careful with new friendships, always watching for signs of insincerity. Melissa remained a steady support, checking in regularly and celebrating small milestones, paying off a credit card, finishing a school project, or delivering a presentation. Laura also began to notice a quiet strength she hadn't given herself credit for before. She had faced a targeted, sophisticated crime and come through it not without scars, but with enough resilience to turn it into something constructive. At one workshop, a woman approached her afterward with tears in her eyes. She said she had been talking to someone online for months who was now asking for money. Because of Laura's presentation, she planned to end the conversation before sending a cent. Moments like that reminded Laura why she kept telling the story, even when it still hurt. Each person who walked away more aware felt like one small victory against the tactics that had nearly ruined her. Her advocacy also helped her find a kind of closure that legal proceedings couldn't provide. The sentences for Lell and Crawford ensured they wouldn't be running their operation for years to come, but her outreach meant she could prevent other operations from succeeding at all. When people asked how she recovered, she often said, "Recovery isn't linear. Some days you feel strong and some days you don't, but surviving something like this shows you're stronger than you thought." By the following autumn, she had stopped referring to herself as just a victim. She was an advocate, an educator, and a resource for others who had been targeted. She still taught English full-time, but her evenings and weekends often included speaking engagements or work on new lesson plans for online safety. Laura knew she couldn't change what had happened. The time, the money, and the relationship she thought was real were gone. But the lessons remained, and they were ones she could share with others before they found themselves in the same position. The man called Ethan Miller had never existed, but the strength Laura discovered in the aftermath, the courage to speak up, to face the people who deceived her, and to help others see the warning signs was entirely real, and that was something no scammer could take away.